Good evening, everybody. Hope you had a good Monday, and thank you for spending some time with me as we dive into the Bible, and specifically 2 Kings 7 through 9. And this is Zeb, of course, and it's kind of a big deal and it's kind of hefty, so let's get through it quickly. As always, I divide these commentaries into two sections. One is, what can we do with this information as far as today's life is concerned? And I'm going to tell you right now, if you read the Bible like it's a bunch of people from long ago, yesterday, and in a different time, a different place, a different style of living, but actually better food. I mean, health-wise, I mean, it was all good meats, well prepared, lentil soup. The bread wasn't like Wonder Bread; it was like full of hearty whole grains and so forth. Anyway, but they didn't have the internet. They didn't have AI. They didn't have, anyway. Let's get on with it. But 2 Kings 7 to 9 is a big deal. It's a dramatic narrative of divine intervention, the judgment of evil, and the responsibility of those who have received good news. That means you. You are in possession of the best news that mankind has ever had. Even if it's been available for 2,000 years, people today still ignore it, still choose other things. You have the good news, so there's a responsibility in that. This one doesn't come back on me right now because I'm talking to you about it, and I'm talking to other people about it all day long. The overarching message, I got one thing right. The overarching message for today is that God can transform hopeless situations overnight. And those who have experienced his salvation have a duty to share with it a starving world. If you don't get involved in every cult that comes along, including the political ones, let's put it that way. No, not that one. I was in a different but related one. Anyway, and if you're not following New Age Jesus, which isn't Jesus at all, instead of actually following biblical Jesus, then, and if you're not the Jews, the Israelis, as it were, after leaving Exodus, who were so much getting on God's nerves that they spent 40 years wandering in the jungle, the desert, in the wilderness, and never did get into the promised land, Canaan. They never did. Their descendants did, but that generation never did. And it's because they could have done that journey in 11 days, but they chose to be stiff-necked people and take every opportunity to complain and gripe. Don't complain, ever. Be thankful. All right, so here's a breakdown for today's life. Here's the message. The urgency of sharing the good news. That's what we're talking about here. The 4 lepers. It starts off with 4 lepers who discovered the abandoned Syrian camp and realized that keeping the food and spoils to themselves, I don't know where the Syrians went, but they left behind everything. They left all their spoils and all of their unspoiled food. But these 4 lepers realized, well, we've had a tough life. We're going through pain and agony and suffering, but we can't just keep all this stuff to ourselves. We're being blessed. We are blessed right now with this incredible abundance. Their conclusion, this day is a day of good news. If we wait until morning light, punishment will overtake us. You can't even wait until morning. You got to go tell somebody right now about Jesus. I mean it. Go tell somebody on the internet or somewhere else about Jesus and about the abundance of mercy and grace and love. It's a direct parallel for believers today to share the gospel and not dilly-dally. Go do it. Trusting God's promise over human logic. I mean, human logic would say you cannot cross the Red Sea. You're going to drown. But, oh, Mary, don't you weep no more. Pharaoh's army got drowned. When famine made survival seem impossible, Elisha, talking about Elisha here, prophesied abundance within 24 hours. The king's officer doubted. He was a skeptic at heart, saying it couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven. So he wasn't totally agnostic. He believed in the Lord. He believed in heaven. He believed it had windows. And he died without eating the food. So because of his doubt, he did not gain access to the abundance that was there before him. So the lesson is to trust God's word even when circumstances seem impossible, or you may miss the blessing. Maybe the blessing won't be for you anymore if you reject God, or you reject this concept of how powerful that God is. God's providence and justice. The previous part was in 2 Kings 7, 1 through 20. This is 2 Kings 8 and 9, skipping ahead here. God is shown to be sovereign over history, directing kings like Hazael and Jehu. I think he was one of the worst of the kings, to execute judgment on the wicked house of Ahab. It warns that persistent wickedness will face judgment, while God's faithfulness is shown in preserving the line of David. Anyway, persistent wickedness will face judgment. You might get away with one or two things, but if you're continuously sinful, continuing acting in ways that's not in God's favor, God's going to lose his patience with you, as he did with the Israelis in Exodus. God is shown to be, the danger of half-hearted obedience. 2 Kings 9. Jehu executed God's judgment, but failed to turn from the sins of Jeroboam, demonstrating that partial obedience is still disobedience. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't get married, have a wonderful wife, and then go cheat on her and watch certain videos on YouTube that none of us have any business going anywhere near. So those are the essential messages for today's life. Let's now discuss messianic significance. Prophecy of abundance, 2 Kings 7. Elisha's promise of massive provision in the midst of utter starvation. I mean, they thought he was crazy. Serves as a type of Christ, who brings spiritual life and living bread, and actual bread, to a world starving due to sin. You know, today's like the first time, or I've had it on my mind like the last 48 hours, when we do communion and there's bread. Jesus said he was living bread, and we're doing this bread in remembrance of him. So I don't know. I don't know that I believe what the Catholics believe, transmutation, I think it's called. I don't know if I believe that it actually turns into Jesus's blood. That might be just a little bit too supernatural for me even. But I do believe that it's not just bread. I do believe that the meaning that we endow it with is holy and sacred and meaningful and impactful. So I don't think anybody does really. Although there was one kid that was complaining that he liked the wafers better, the little white wafers better than the pita bread. But, he's a kid. Anyway, the unlikely saviors, the 4 lepers, social outcasts, are the one who bring the good news of salvation to the city. This parallels how God uses the foolish and weak things of the world to bring the message of Jesus. Oh, brother, is that ever true? I have been foolish and weak. The Lord has used me. I know a few people. Sometimes somebody who's not faithful and not really walking in the way that the Lord would have us walk, but people know that they are Christian and they have questions. Those questions are not necessarily bad questions. You're just going to make sure you ask the right person or the right deity, which there's only one in 3 persons. The judgment of the doubter, the officer who despised the prophetic word. I mentioned him earlier. He was the one who said this day, this one. King's officer doubted, saying it couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven. So the officer who despised the prophetic word saw the blessing, but did not share in it. This acts as a warning regarding rejecting the Messiah, Jesus. And lastly, the restoration of the Shunammite woman, 2 Kings 8, 1 through 6. The restoration of her land by the king, triggered by Gehazi, recounting Elisha, miracle of bringing her son back to life. Remember that one? Points to the ultimate resurrection power of Jesus and the restoration of all things for those who follow him. I'm going to get a list put together of all the people in the Old and New Testament who were resurrected. Not that they resurrected themselves, or not that they called upon the Father to resurrect them, but that God resurrected them. There's several. So ultimately, the message, if you take something away from this video, here it goes. Do not hoard the good news. Just as the lepers could not keep the news of the abandoned camp to themselves, believers are called to share the salvation found in Jesus Christ, regardless of personal cost or fear. I mean, there's tens of thousands of people in Nigeria that are being slaughtered, massacred, just because they stand up and say that they're Christian and they believe in Jesus. It's not that it's necessarily always safe to express your faith. There's talk about Canada trying to make speaking references from the Bible, hate crime. We live in interesting times. We live in times where lawlessness is all around us, persecution, is all around us. Even here in the United States, there's a lot of stuff even happening here in the United States. Anyway, we live in interesting times. But if you let that keep you from spreading the good word, you lose. The person who you might have talked to about Jesus or sang a song about Jesus to, they lose. Be brave, be bold, get out there, speak about Jesus to anybody and everybody that will listen, and speak about him twice to those who won't. Okay, that's all I got. I'm done. I hope you got some benefit out of that.